You're supposed to be free of that, but you're not free of that. And how can you make sure that once again the universities become places that are free of this miserable, centralized, politically correct control? You can read a book about it by Professor Alan Bloom. It's called The Closing of the American Mind. He wrote this book a quarter of a century ago. He saw it coming. And what you have to do is fight back. You have to help the scientists who wish to speak out and say what rubbish this global warming nonsense is, but dare not do so. Help those scientists, support them, give them a platform, invite them to events like this so that they get used to getting away with telling the scientific truth without being victimized and even denied tenure by their colleagues. Fight back!
Lord Monckton simply stated, I don't buy Al Gore's pitch.
Good.
In fact, I'm not even convinced that Al Gore buys Al Gore's pitch. Here's my question. My wife and I recall back 10 years ago, after the 2000 election, remember Al Gore lost the election, the hanging chad, the Supreme Court decision, all that. He disappeared for a while. I think he went to Australia, if I remember correctly, and he came back looking like a wino. He'd grown a beard, and I'm wondering, what is known about how this scam was concocted? Who came up with it? I don't really give him the credit to be able to do that on his own. What's known about who was behind that?
Right. The best thing to do, it's a long story which I certainly don't have time to tell tonight, but it's a very good question. How did we get where we are today? How did the intellectual common sense of the West and its academic institutions shut down so completely, so suddenly, and with such potentially disastrous results? And what I would like to do is to suggest a book to you by my good friend and colleague, Christopher Booker of the Sunday Telegraph in the United Kingdom. Now, every Sunday, Christopher Booker, come rain or shine, whether he's on holiday or not, writes a column in the Sunday Telegraph. It's a whole page, a broadsheet page, so there's plenty of material on it. He nearly always devotes that column to global warming. And his book on how it was that we got to the present situation, which is exactly the question that you're asking, sir, is the best account I've seen of exactly who was behind it. And I think it's fair to summarize that book very briefly by saying that he attributes this movement towards the belief in global warming and hence in world government to the United Nations, and in particular to a Canadian bureaucrat called Sir Maurice Strong, who 25 years ago set up the Earth Summit in Rio that happened 20 years ago. He plotted it, and he said at that time that he was going to use the environmental movement as the Trojan horse by which he would introduce world government run by the UN. And that, of course, would indeed, if he got away with it, and he is still trying, be the end of democracy here and worldwide. We know what it's like if we give up our democracy, because we gave it up carelessly to the European dictatorship. And last week, while we didn't even have a government, because they were trying to haggle over who would get into bed with who, the European Union reached directly into the pockets of the British taxpayer without any vote by us. There is no mechanism by which we could have voted. There's a European Parliament that we elect, but it has no power whatsoever. It's not like your Congress. And the British Parliament has no power whatsoever. The commissars, unelected, unaccountable, unsackable, unquestionable, were able to reach into the pockets of every tax-paying household just last week and help themselves to $2,000 from each tax-paying household, just like that, without any representation, without any debate, using a clause in one of the multiple European treaties that our negotiators hadn't bothered to read. And the only way to stop this trend away from democracy among our governing class, I'm going to have to use those same 3 words again, is that anyone who tries to take away your democracy by introducing this cap and trade or this climate bill or having anything to do with the world government ambitions of Maurice Strong and the United Nations, if any of your elected representatives does any of those things, then you must do what, alas, we can no longer do, for we have given up our democracy. Vote them out.
My question's not too far off his. Investigative reporters and detectives use the same phrase, follow the money. Mr. Gore is easy to follow. Can you expound on that with others?
Yes, I can. I would recommend looking at those of Glenn Beck's television programs on Fox News. Come on, let's hear it for Fox. In which he examines the origins of the so-called stimulus package. Now, if I bought a box of Viagra and it was as ineffective as your stimulus package, I'd want my money back. But the stimulus package was written by an interlocking series of communist organizations. Glenn Beck's people did the digging, they found this out, they exposed it on Fox News, the mainstream media, communist itself, looked the other way and said nothing. But in that stimulus package, look up, I know it's a long bill, they always are these days, they seem to produce bills that are not less than 1,000 pages long, and even the sponsors of the bills that they're voting on haven't read them, let alone anybody else. And if that's democracy, I don't like the smell of it, and I think you should change it. But anyway, in that stimulus bill, have a look at how much money has been allocated, extra money, to NASA and NOAA, the National Oceanographic and Atmospheric Administration. Huge amounts of extra money, and both of those organizations have been retasked. They are no longer a space agency and an ocean and atmosphere agency, respectively. They are climate change agencies with vast increases in their budget and their establishment and their profit. So you need to look at what your Obama administration is doing. It is handing money, and very, very large amounts of money, to any scientist or other group that will go along with this climate scare, because it knows it only has to look at the opinion polls, that everything it is doing, from the healthcare bill to the stimulus package to the climate bill, etc., is downright unpopular with the American people, who know that they have elected a monstrosity instead of a government, and they cannot wait to vote it out. And I'm sorry if there are any Democrats here, but it has to be said that this is not a democratic administration. And they have done untold damage to the very way that Congress works with these insultingly long and diffuse bills. But in those bills is the detail of how they are intending to bribe those who do not at present agree with their climate rubbish, so that they can eventually help their friends in the UN to establish the communistic world government that is their heart's real desire. And let's just look, therefore, very briefly at the climate bill itself.